on refusing to harden. I have been watching the river near my home, and I noticed something this week that made me think of you. Where the water meets stone, the stone does not win. It stands there, proud and immovable, and for a season it looks like the victor. But give it years, and the water has carved a passage clean through. Softness, it turns out, has a persistence that hardness cannot match. I write to you today because I suspect you are being tempted to harden. Something has happened, or perhaps many small somethings have gathered like sediment, and a quiet voice inside you is whispering that the wisest course is to feel less, to expect less, to pull the tender parts of yourself behind a wall and let the calloused exterior handle whatever comes next. I understand the impulse. I have stood at that very threshold more times than I care to admit. But I am writing to ask you, with all the warmth I possess, not to walk through that door. Consider what happens to leather left out in the sun without oil. It cracks. It becomes brittle, and what was once supple enough to bend with the body becomes something that breaks at the first sharp fold. This is what happens to the heart that decides it will no longer be moved. You think you are protecting yourself, and perhaps for a day or a week you do feel safer. But safety purchased at the cost of feeling is not safety at all. It is a kind of slow starvation. You have locked the door against thieves, yes, but you have also locked it against the friends who were on their way with bread. Here is what I find quietly hilarious about us. We get hurt, and we decide the solution is to become unavailable to joy. As though joy were the problem. As though the ache of loss were not, in truth, the echo of something wonderful that preceded it. You do not grieve what you never loved. You do not feel disappointment without having first felt hope. The pain you are nursing right now is not evidence that you were foolish to care. It is evidence that you are alive enough to be touched by the world. And that, my dear friend, is not a flaw to be corrected. It is a capacity to be honored. I know what you will say. You will tell me it is easier to speak of openness than to practice it. That I am asking you to place your hand back on the stove after it has already burned you. But I am not asking you to be reckless. I am asking you to be brave, which is an entirely different thing. Recklessness ignores the flame. Bravery sees it clearly, feels the heat against its skin, and chooses to cook the meal anyway. There is a particular kind of courage required to remain soft in a world that often rewards the appearance of toughness. It is not the courage of the battlefield, it is the courage of the open hand. And it is, I think, the more difficult of the two, because no one writes songs about the person who simply kept loving when it would have been easier to stop. Think of the people in your life whose presence most nourishes you. Are they not, in some essential way, soft? Not weak, never weak, but available, present, willing to be affected by what happens around them. When you sit with someone who has refused to harden, you can feel it. There is a warmth that comes off them like heat from a hearth in winter. They listen, and you know they are truly listening. They laugh from somewhere deep and honest. When they ask how you are, you understand that they actually want to know. These people have not been spared suffering. Often they have suffered more than most. The difference is not in what life did to them, but in what they chose to do with what life gave them. They let the rain soak in instead of building a roof over their hearts. And here is the part that surprises everyone. Softness is not merely more noble than hardness. It is more practical. The rigid branch snaps in the storm. The supple one bends and survives the winter. The person who has walled off disappointment has also walled off wonder. And without wonder, life becomes an exercise in endurance rather than an act of discovery. Have you ever watched a child encounter a puddle for the first time? That delight, that unguarded astonishment, is not naivety. It is the natural posture of a heart that has not yet been talked out of its own aliveness. You were born knowing how to marvel. You were only trained to stop. I want to be honest with you about something. Remaining open will cost you. It will cost you in grief when what you love changes form, as all things do. It will cost you in vulnerability when the world does not return your tenderness in kind. There will be afternoons when you sit alone and wonder if the whole endeavor is worth it, whether it might be simpler to care about nothing and coast gently toward the end. In those moments, I want you to remember the scent of bread just pulled from the oven, the sound of rain against a window when you are warm inside, the feeling of someone's hand finding yours beneath a table. These experiences are not available to the hardened heart. They require the very openness that frightens you. They are the wages of your willingness to remain soft, and they are, I promise you, sufficient compensation for the trouble. There is one more thing worth saying. When you refuse to harden, you give others permission to remain soft as well. Your openness becomes an invitation. Your willingness to be moved becomes a kind of shelter for those around you who are also afraid, who are also wondering whether they should wall themselves off from the full, bewildering experience of being human. You may never know the effect your tenderness has. A word spoken gently, a moment of patience when frustration would have been forgiven. These things ripple outward in ways you cannot track, touching lives you will never know you touched. So here is what I ask of you. The next time you feel that familiar tightening, that impulse to withdraw and protect, pause. Take one breath. Feel the warmth of whatever room you are standing in, and choose deliberately to remain available to what comes next. Not because you are guaranteed a gentle outcome, but because the alternative, a life lived safely behind glass, is no life at all. You were not made for mere survival. You were made for the full, aching, luminous experience of being here, for the laughter and the grief, the bread and the rain, the hand beneath the table. Stay soft, my friend. The world needs what only an open heart can offer, and yours, despite everything, still has so much left to give.